March 6, 2023. This is the S&P 500 2000 tick chart, E-mini futures on the S&P on the Thinkorswim platform. You don't have to watch my entire video. You can just go down to the descriptions where I timestamp where I took my trades, as well as where I thought some interesting setups might have been. So this is what the chart looked like today. Originally in the pre-market, actually this is how I marked it up, and these are my trades. So I actually took a lot of trades right here, total of 7 trades. I had 5 winners and 2 losers, and I'll go through them. I took a lot of trades in this area, and in hindsight, there are a couple of trades, actually I think 3 trades in here that I kind of regretted taking. They weren't the safest or cleanest setups. I mean, 2 of them didn't work, but 1 of them did, and it was kind of an iffy trade in my opinion. But this is what the chart looked like today. In the pre-market, I did have a trading range drawn, but later, as you'll see, it doesn't really matter. Well, it's not that it doesn't really matter, it's just that this trading range here and here never comes into play. And what it looked like is the entire price action just looked like a, well, kind of like a big M or an A, where it just kind of rallied up, consolidated, stalled out, and then sold off. But it wasn't a very clean move up and a clean move down. There's little areas of consolidation, as well as the price action today was very, I would say, slow, because the volume seemed to have been very, very, very low, lower than usual. Because if you kind of look at between here, which is 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, there aren't very many candles here, as well as between 11 to 12. There's not a lot of price action going on. So the setups were kind of far and few. So let's get into the trades. There's a pre-market. I don't trade the pre-market. I did see this trend channel going down and then the correction going up. I do draw because I think I saw a measured move from here, one clean leg up, followed by another clean leg up. And during the pullback, you could say there was one leg down, pulled up, and then a second leg down. But this is all pre-market, which is something I don't really trade anyways. Markets open, prices continue moving, and immediately right around, I guess, 7 minutes in, I do see a clean second entry long and a failed second entry short, because this could be a new low, comes up, makes a first entry short, second entry short, and it fails. To back that up, it also made a new high, first entry long, second entry long. So I took this trade. I guess it could be considered a little aggressive, but I like the signal bar. I felt it was kind of a low risk trade. It's going with trend at the moment, because right now I do think at the time I was thinking it was a trading range, because I thought the trading range could be up here, and it was kind of coming up, and then potentially another trading range, maybe it was a little bit higher here, but I wasn't 100% sure. And it was this other trading range that I was developing. You don't have these lines to guide you at that point in time, but it's aggressive because I might be coming up to the top of the trading range or butting up against it, but I felt it was a pretty clean setup, so I went ahead and took it, even though it's kind of close to the high of day. Turns out working. And then prices continue. You could also say there's a, well, new low here, because I counted this as a new low, first entry short, second entry short, fails. And then along the line, you could just thought this is a spike, and then maybe going to trading range, you count as first entry short, second entry short, but I didn't count it that way because I already got the trade, and I just said, okay, well, it's a good way to start the day. Prices continue moving, makes a new high here. It's not very clean, but you can see a first entry long here, comes back. Technically, it's a second entry long as soon as it breaks above this candle, but I didn't see it that way. I just kind of decided to leave it alone because this could be, depending on how your chart looked, could have just been one leg down, and then this would be considered first entry long, and then this could be considered a second entry long, but I just kind of left it alone because it's a little ambiguous what the count could be. It's also getting kind of congested. But here I also saw this triple top, and I counted this as a new high, and it's a first entry long here, and this sets up for a second entry long here. Now this setup, it's a pretty decent signal bar. It closed above the EMA, excuse me, it didn't close above the EMA. It's a little bit below. And at this point, I was wondering if it would actually be a failed second entry long back to the bottom of this trading range here, or if this truly would have been a second entry long, had this bar actually closed higher and above the EMA, preferably, I would have jumped on this trade. But since it left it a little bit ambiguous, it kind of makes it a less than high probability trade. So I left it alone. Now, at that point, you could stake that there's a support right here, which later becomes a channel. But based off of support, I wasn't confident enough, just mainly based upon if only it had been a better candle, as well as if this trading range, the lower part was higher, then it gave me 2 key entry points, as well as confirmation with the EMA higher. But if you're a little bit more aggressive, you could have taken that trade. I didn't though. The price continued chopping around, breaks out of this trading range now. Let's continue to move up. At one point, I wasn't sure where the top of this trading channel would have been. It could have been actually down here. And that actually fits pretty nicely. And I did play that trading channel at one time, and it treated this as a breakout. And then I didn't really do anything with it though. So prices kept moving up. And as soon as it went up and exceeded it and violated the second time, because it was originally down here, I went ahead and dragged it up to here. And I noticed it violated it up here again. So I said, well, let's just take it all the way to the top here. Chops around. It formed this small consolidation area. I did see this new high, first entry long, second entry long, but this is a bad signal bar and it didn't touch the EMA, so I left it alone. You could argue that it is a triple test right here, but the signal bar just kind of held me back. Also, had it touched the EMA, it would have given me a little more confidence that maybe it was worthwhile trade. Prices continue moving up. It's chopping around. It's respecting the EMA. This is where I take my second trade, and unfortunately, it doesn't work out. I jumped in a little early. So this is the new high, comes up, first entry long, let me zoom in, and the second entry long forms right here. So it's coming up. As soon as this candle breaks above here, that's where the second entry long is confirmed. But I actually jumped in on the engulfing because I assumed that it was just going to go back up. I should have waited because this candle, it's a little early. I should have, if it had closed above the EMA, then maybe maybe it'd been okay to jump in early. But since it closed below the EMA, I should have waited to see what the trigger candle would have done. And as you can see, it closed low. So I took an entry here. My stop is below this candle. It turns out to be a failed second entry long, and it takes me out on this candle. So had I kind of been more patient, looked at it, not jump in early, because in this trading, you have to be very patient. You can't jump in too early, because every time you try to anticipate a trade without full confirmation, you run the risk of, well, something like this happening. Now, if it had worked out, I would have thought, I'm a genius, etc. But I think that would have been lucky, as well as it potentially would have built a bad habit of me always jumping the gun or anticipating a trade when the trade hasn't really been set up yet. So this is kind of a, well, I wouldn't say an unforced error, but it is an error that kind of proves and helps reinforce that you need to be more patient, or I need to be more patient with my trades, as well as wait for the setup to really be visible, especially in a situation like this where it's consolidating. It's not giving clear guidance of which way it's going. To jump in early is taking a big risk since I don't have price action on my side. Now this third trade, this is a foolish trade that I actually shouldn't have taken because it's not a clean setup. And I got fooled by this large green bar. And at the time I was thinking, well, I'm trying to recover from this second trade that I got red, and I'm thinking, okay, my original thought was probably correct. It probably is going to go up. So when I saw this candle form, I immediately jumped on one candle above. It fills me, and then immediately it takes me out because my standard bracket safety stop is usually going to be supposed to be down here, but I didn't have time to move it at the time, and it stopped me out in the middle right here. And that was kind of a foolish trade. Had it not stopped me out and I kept it one tick below, it would have stopped me out for sure on this candle or even on this candle. So this is actually a not necessarily a no reason trade, but it was a FOMO trade that I should have left alone because I thought that this trade, the second trade, was still going to go in the direction I originally thought, but should have waited for more price action to play out. Prices continue moving up. I take my fourth trade. So I see a new low here, I see a first entry short, and then a second entry short. The second entry short, although this is a full second entry short, it closed very bullish, and I like where the trend and the price action is indicating that it's probably going to be a failed second entry short. So when the candle formed, I put my entry one tick above because I saw there's enough room to potentially make it up to here. And as a break of this trend channel, it wants to make a new high. So I thought there's enough room to get a quick scalp out of this. And so I do get a quick scalp, but I have to keep in mind that this was very congested. Although it's a good signal bar, it's above the EMA. It's not necessarily the safest trade, and I think I should have waited for a confirmation of either a lower high or just potentially let the trade go, because it's also potentially running up against the top of this trend channel. As you can see, it worked out, and I got a good runner out of it. I mean, not the best runner, but I think I got my runner stopped out here. Prices continue coming back down. It touched the top of this, which gives me more confidence that this is the top of the trading channel, because I certainly could have dragged this guy and placed it up here just to get rid of this overshoot. But I thought the overshoot it was okay to have this overshoot. Prices continue moving down. This is where I take my next trade. So I consider this a new high. Let's go ahead and zoom in. New high. I see a first entry long here, comes down, and I'm constantly waiting and watching for second entry long. Now, second entry long, I do have this trading range. Now, at one time I was playing with the idea of maybe it was actually up here, and this is a overshoot, but I eventually dragged it down here just to keep and capture as much of the price action as I can. So I'm watching here, and I mark it later. It's a second entry long and a fail breakout, because I actually had this a little bit higher. I think it was probably closer to probably about right here. So second entry long, it's a little aggressive, fail breakout. It's touching 4 times here. So I'm thinking, okay, for whatever reason, price action does not want to go below this line. So I actually enter 1 tick above here. It is buying at the high of this small little trend channel, small little trading range, but I'm buying at the high technically, but I also saw it as the low of this bigger dominating trading range. I also like the fact that it, tested, I guess you could say 5 times, but 2 times for sure, 1 here and 1 big grouping here. And I thought this price will hold. Now what I did was I entered, but I kept my stop not 1 tick below, but 2 ticks below. Had I kept it 1 tick below, this might have flashed and taken me out. So I gave it a little more risk because I felt that the trade was going to be good. It's going to break out. It broke out of this trend channel, and then it made 1 move up. But I had to be quick because I wasn't sure if the EMA is coming into play. So I was able to get a quick scalp out of that. As you can see, EMA does come into play, forces prices right back down, which was, this is definitely a little risky. It's aggressive. Prices are congested, and I wasn't looking for a big move because you don't have very good confirmation price action is going to give it to you. So I just took it for that 1 quick scalp. I also saw a second setup, very similar to before. However, I like the setup slightly better because it is doing 1, 2, depending on how you drew it, you could have 4 touches. Maybe there's 2 here and maybe 1 here or 2 here. And then I saw a final confirmation coming up here. And I see a potential new high, first entry long, second entry long. This is a good signal bar for the second entry long, but it still wasn't good enough for me at the time because I was wondering if it's going to do a fail breakout, because when it broke out here and then did this quadruple test, I dragged the bottom of the trading range to here, and I said there's potential for failed breakout. It has kind of 2 key entry points, and if this holds as well as this holds, it might actually go back up for at least a clean scalp. The problem is that the EMA is right here. So I actually waited till this candle closed, because when this candle closed, I said, okay, this is a good signal bar. It went up, came back down. I didn't like the looks of this trigger bar, so I wanted a little more confirmation. I saw that this candle closed, so I actually had 1 tick above here, which is certainly a little risky because it's already pretty high. And this candle got my core, and unfortunately I wanted more from my runner, so I kept it pretty much 1 tick above, which is about right here, and it went and took out my runner. Had I actually kept it at break even, which I don't want to do, just because break even you're still paying for commissions, I probably would have been safe. But then when this formed, I did see that there's a higher low here. So if you look at the big visual, it could be first entry long, then second entry long, and then this is a higher low. Now, I went ahead and took this entry as well. So this higher low turned out to be pretty nice because it closed above the EMA. It's a very bullish bar. It's confirming my second entry long visual. It also kind of confirms the second entry long down here. If you took it from this high, first entry long, second entry long, comes back down, and then there's a higher low. So I like the setup of this trade. And I went ahead and took it, and it's clearly going back into this trading range. I mean, granted, this is the midline. It could bounce off of here and come back down because it was tested a few times and it failed. So at this moment, there is a bearish bias, but I was thinking it's going to go back up. I just had it's just the way I looked at it and the way I interpreted the trade, it looked like it would work. It does work. It kind of didn't move, flash up as quickly as I'd like. And unfortunately, I didn't get more than just my core profit. Runner got stopped out. I also saw new low here, first entry short, second entry short. But although this is second entry short, I don't like that it's counter trend to the overall price action, which is indicating that it's bullish. So it came down, it's failed. It turns out to be a failed second entry short, but you don't know at the time. So here you could have thought, okay, this is a decent signal bar, but you're fighting against the EMA, you're counter trend. So I saw it as potentially a failed second entry short. Turns out it is actually a failed second entry short. I didn't take the trade though. I think I was just a little hung up and not sure that it was going to continue up. But in hindsight, this would have been a possible trade if you had missed this higher low. And if you had waited on the higher low, then this would have been a second confirmation that this is probably worthwhile trade. Although it's later in the price action because more things have happened, it still would have been a worthwhile entry to take. And prices continue moving up. Touches the top of the trading range. Comes back down. Here I saw that it had made two measured moves. So had I still been in the trade from this higher low, it looks like it would have been enough to get a nice, pretty decent runner out of it. You probably would have tried to take some profits off here, or maybe if you're a little more ambitious, aggressive, take it at the top of the trading range. Then prices continue moving down. I don't see any clean setups. Yes, there are second entries because you say there's new high, first entry long, second entry long, failure. That's far from the EMA. It's kind of within this trend channel going down. So it's a little iffy. And if you want to treat it as a failed second entry long, it's a little ambitious and a little aggressive because you're also running up against this ascending trend channel, which has been proven that it is a strong channel. So to take a short at that time, way up here, I think would have been a little premature because you don't know if it's going to bounce back up. So I didn't mark it, but I also didn't want to potentially take that trade. As you see, it's a pretty strong pullback. And now it went to this consolidation range, kept going down. At this point, I'm just thinking, you know what? Price action is very slow today because if you looked at where the 9:30 time frame was, about right here, to about 10, and if you just look at the overall price action, there's not that many candles being printed. So volume definitely was lower. You can confirm the volume on the bigger daily charts, and it just kind of crawled along. I did see a second entry short here. It's a bit aggressive though because this the new low, first entry short, second entry short. It's the closest and best setup thus far out of the last previous setup that I saw because you don't really get a good, clean, high probability setup here. I mean, you could argue that this was a new low, first entry short, and a second entry short, but then you potentially get a third entry short. Had this candle actually closed a little bit better, you could say 1, 2, second entry, and this might have been worth the trade. But when I saw this, it was a little confusing, so I thought the best idea was just to stay away. And this is probably the best setup, not a good setup, but one of the best. Excuse me, it's not a good setup, but it was the best one out of the current time frame because it actually touched the EMA and got rejected. But I wasn't going to take that trade just because it just looks sketchy. Prices are moving really slowly. It just wasn't telling me a lot that it was worthwhile to try to risk that potential trade. And then prices continue moving and it's just really, really slow. It falls into this trading range. Now, if you look at it, it's like from 1040 to about 1140, there should be 60 bars on a 1-minute chart, but there are not 60 bars. On top of that, if you look at the overall range, it's going from about 4,054 to about 4,061. It's only 5-point range. And even in those 5 points, these candles are just kind of chopping left and right. So to take any kind of setup, you run the risk of getting chopped to pieces. So I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna sit on my hands, just continue watching. If there's a setup, maybe I'll take it. But the market is telling me it's not providing me much of a good, clean setup. And then I do find this trend channel going down, but unfortunately there was no good, clean second entry setups or any good trades that I could find. So I just kind of watched it go all the way to the end and it finally closes. Now, if you look at the total length of this day's trading, excuse me, you could probably draw just a simple line here. So this is how much volume was today. And you compare it to last Friday, it's roughly the same because Friday, although it really rallied, the volume, the price action didn't offer that many candles. And so when you finally get to something like a few days ago, you can tell clearly there's way more price action because this is the total length of 2,000 ticks. So how many candles fit in here today versus how many was more available on that day on the 1st of March, the first of the month. So seeing that, I just thought, okay, well, it's a good indication, especially when I saw this play out, that I had to just be more careful, be more patient. Maybe today wasn't the day to try to take a bunch of trades. And unfortunately, I kind of learned that the hard way. As I said, there's a few trades in here that I'm not, two trades for sure, one after the other, one, two. These two I lost on, and they weren't the cleanest setup. I just jumped the gun. And the second one is I just thought I was right. So those are never good reasons to take a trade, jumping the gun. And the second is thinking you're right, because you never know what's right and what's wrong. You just trade what's presented to you. If what you think is going to happen doesn't happen, you shouldn't take the trade. Excuse me. If what you think is going to happen and you're waiting and you're watching, you need confirmation that that is what you thought before you jump in. And if it didn't work the first time, jumping immediately afterwards rarely works, which is what I did here when I saw the big green candle and I said, well, obviously my thought was right, but obviously I was wrong. Now, it's a good thing, it's strange as strange as it sounds, I think it was good that I lost on this trade as well, because this is a no setup trade. Had I actually gotten this trade and it worked out and it went up, that most likely would have implanted the seed of bad habit. It would have made me think next time I see this, obviously I'm right, I read it correctly, and sooner or later it's going to bite me because it's not a high probability trade. Now, if this was actually a decent setup and I got it wrong, I would be okay with that because even high probability trades are not guaranteed. It's just higher probability for it to work out. That's what I'm looking to get, looking to enter on trades, not this haphazard, I think I'm right type of setup. So that's how I saw this trades today. Hopefully that was helpful. And it was helpful for me.